All right. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. We are incredibly grateful to be here. We are Beyond Pricing, and I'm here with Jim and Jennifer, who we'll introduce in a moment. When we got the opportunity to present at VRM Intel, we were incredibly excited first. And we really wanted to take an opportunity to present data that was not only insightful, but also useful for property managers in general. So with that in mind, today we'll be going through a few data sets, really at a high level and sort of with a large scope, as in we're not focusing on individual markets. I'm getting the perspective of two best-in-class managers that we work with and are big fans of their business. So I'm Jesse Lott. I work in operations and strategy at Beyond Pricing, and today I'm joined by Jim DeVos and Jennifer Mucha. Jim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, you just did.
Maybe a little bit of a bio background.
Oh, sure. Okay, that's better. Yeah. I'm Jim DeVos, president of Best Beach Getaways. Best Beach is located in the Florida Panhandle. The markets we serve span from Navarre Beach to Panama City Beach. We also have a small but growing operation down mid-Gulf Coast on the West Coast in the Anna Maria Island area. We started our business in 2008, and we currently manage roughly 375 vacation rental properties, beach houses, condos, and so on.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And Jennifer, would you like to give a high level on yourself and Arrive?
So I started the business 16 years ago, small business, ran it pretty small for quite a long time. And then about 5 years ago, decided to start expanding, challenge myself, grow through acquisitions and things like that. So we ended up doing some acquisitions in Palm Springs. So I'm in Central Oregon, in Bend and Sun River. And then we did acquisitions in Palm Springs, Hood River, Oregon, Hawaii, in both Kauai and Oahu. So we're kind of spread out along the West Coast now in various locations. We have about 310 properties, I believe, right now. So we've seen, quite a lot of growth in the last 5 years.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. And so just a quick plug from our sponsor. So Beyond Pricing throughout this we've been publishing as much data as we can. So we believe in data being a resource for all. This is pulled directly from, let me back up. The information that we're posting on beyondpricing.com/Corona support is pulled from our database of 240,000 active listings. So we have a very diverse, not just deep, but also we have a wide breadth as far as the number of units that we're looking at. And we're publishing this regularly. So invite you to go on. We have support not only for using the tool, but also data that's available for given markets that you can dive into and kind of see where reservations, cancellations, those types of metrics are coming in for your particular market. And so with that said, Jim, do you want to give a quick rundown on sort of what your experience has been with the coronavirus and how it's played out in your market and with your business?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to tell my sad story. I was looking at some of our data last night, and I broke things really into 3 2-week segments. I looked at March 1st to the 15th, March 16th to the 31st, and April 1st to the 15th. And I looked at the amount of, first thing I looked at was the amount of bookings, the dollar value of bookings generated during each of those periods of time. And while I don't want to give you the exact numbers, I want to give you the percentages of what I saw, just to give you how quickly things change. Not that you don't already know it, but from March 1st to the 15th, our bookings during that period of time were 27% higher than they were same time frame 2019. between March 16th to the 31st, the difference was 82% below same time last year. And so far, April 1st to the 15th, 87% below same time last year. So the first thing that we're seeing beyond cancellations, which I'm sure everybody's experiencing, is you are seeing a significant downturn in the velocity of bookings as we run into the leading edge of peak season. So, so that's been pretty dramatic. And then the other side of it is when you look at year-over-year bookings for March and April, March down almost 50%, April because they shut the state of Florida down, we're almost down to nothing for the month of April. So that's our sad tale.
Just a complete reversal of fortunes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Jim, you and I work closely, and we were pacing incredibly well, and this has just been almost a literal brake pedal, slammed all the way down to the floor. So it just shut everything off.
Yeah, and that's
Jennifer?
exactly what we were seeing too, was the significant uptick this year, which we honestly credit in large part to beyond pricing, but also just the economy and that we run a good business. And so this combination of these things and being kind of like at the highest of highs, going, hey, it's the best spring ever, and we have all these numbers. We had we were up about 15% for the year, significantly higher on some homes, significantly higher in some markets. And then in the same kind of pattern as Jim had, we were a little bit delayed from Florida because we're on the West Coast and it was hitting us later, but about 85% drop. And then by now it's about 90% of, future revenue for the year. At least we're down about 85% and 90% for the rest of the year. So, it was very fast and very, very, we could see it was going to happen because we had seen it had happened to Jim and to the East Coast, and we could see what was going to be happening next. And sure enough, phone calls started coming in. So it was the highest of highs and the lowest of lows within a very short time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the most difficult parts of this entire virus coming on is, although we knew about it and we had seen it in the abstract, it really feels like it came on so quickly. And we went from really a great booking season, setting up summer, building on year-over-year revenue growth, and then just everything shut off so quickly. I mean, almost it's an emotional sort of response when you see that kind of change.
Very much so. Very much so.
Oh.
Yeah, and it also left us, and I think it did everybody. It left us very much in. There's no time to plan for it. You can't think theoretically about what you're going to do next week because every day things are changing and it's hitting you harder and you're dealing with the specific details of those days. So we kind of had to get to the end of the heavy cancellations before we could really stop and regroup. We were kind of dealing as we went, but you can really stop and regroup and go, okay, what's next? And you could see the writing on the wall that everything's canceled into the middle of May. Now what's after that? And kind of start planning strategically instead of planning defensively. Now we're planning offensively, saying, okay, we can see the future. We can see some idea of what may or may not happen in these timelines, and let's go from there. So it's the nice thing is it slowed down a little bit, but we did have that time where you just you're completely reacting. You're not coming up with a plan at all. It's all reactionary.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That's exactly
Yep.
right.
Yep. So we have a number of data sets that we've pulled on the beyond pricing side that I'd like to share, and then get your perspective on. We have 4. I don't think that we'll get to 4, but first, this is cancellation volume, and I'll walk you through what you're looking at. What we did is we indexed cancellation volume to January 1st. Well, actually, cancellation and revenue volume. And so the way that you can read this chart is along the x-axis, you have dates. So you can go along from the beginning of the year through, let's call it May. And you can see these spikes. And the way to read that is 100 is you'll be exactly equal with what happened on the first of the year. So we'll call that quote unquote normal. And then as we progress through the year, we start to see some spikes. So we start to see Europe begin to pick up in late to mid-February. And then sort of the wheels come off in March as far as cancellations go. And so if you look at the scale, if it goes from 100 up to 200 on the y-axis, that's doubling the amount of volume of cancellations. If it goes to 500, that's 5x. And we can see in the middle of March that we went all the way up to about 24 times the number of cancellations relative to the beginning of the year. And it's pretty impressive how consistent the volume of revenue and cancellations are throughout the year and year over year. And so what we're seeing on the Beyond Pricing side, looking across all the units that we see, is a historical spike in cancellations. And so with that said, Jennifer, does this resonate with you? Have you seen this in your business? How has this played out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We often talk about cancellations because, I don't know, it's just a topic that you talk about. And ironically, looking at those numbers is exactly how history's been for the last 16 years. There are no cancellations. There just aren't any. And when, and so we have these cancellation policies in place, and we talk about them, and we have, 5 a month or whatever it is. It's very consistent. There's nothing unexpected about it. We know exactly what our policy is, how many days out they can cancel, if they're going to have a fee or not have a fee. And it's a theoretical thing, and we never dealt with it. So when this happened, it was very shocking and very unexpected. And I guess the good news is we had a policy in place that the whole team knew what they were going to say. The bad news is that immediately Airbnb came up with their version of what we could say about their reservations, which was nothing. So that started us down a road of saying, okay, it's time to start rethinking this policy that's been in place for so many years and has worked for so many years. And then we had to figure out what the next step was going to be for each new rollout from an OTA that came through with different regulations, and if we were going to adjust our direct bookings to match any of the OTAs or not. So that was we were about that busy with cancellations. That looks exactly like my days felt.
Actually, this chart matches my electrocardiogram.
Yeah, that's fair.
And there was a point along there. Actually, the line on the bottom, I had to be resuscitated about 4 times over that time frame.
Fair,
So,
fair.
See, and I was thinking that this matched my alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, there are a couple things. There's a couple things, and our experience matched Jennifer's just exactly right. Exactly the same way. It's just stunning, and it reminded me a lot. It reminded me a lot of the Gulf oil spill back in 2010, because I can still tell everybody. I can tell you the day that our phone calls switched from I want to book to I want to cancel, and it was rapid, and it mirrored this. What for us in Florida, what has made this so different is that the local governmental authorities closed the beaches down, and then the governor of Florida said, okay, no short-term rentals. He did it for 2 weeks, and then he extended it for another 3 at the 11th hour, by the way. And so we weren't even able to convince people, hey, no reason to cancel. We were dealt the hand that we had absolutely no control over. The other thing that was sort of stunning to me, and unfortunately I kind of missed it completely, was Airbnb coming to the table and saying, hey, by the way, we're going to take the control of your cancellation policy out of your hands, and we're just going to refund everybody. We were in the process of switching channel managers, and so we hadn't gotten Airbnb set up yet in our system, and so we missed all of that. And and thankfully we were able to take better control of the cancellation policy because it wasn't taken out of our hands. So I thought I feel pretty fortunate that we missed some of that because we had other stuff to deal with. So it was really when I saw what Airbnb was doing, I was really dumbstruck that they took that approach, because taking the decision making out of the people who have responsibility for property management, just to me is about as unreasonable as it can be. As I look at this cancellation chart, and I look more at the bottom line, which is the new booking line, I think we as property managers, cancellation bad enough, we as property managers are going to have to address that in the coming weeks, because what we have to do is we have to figure out what can we do to turn the spigot on more quickly. What are the things that we're going to have to do in our offerings in the marketplace to get people excited about coming out for vacation in the opening environment as it opens. So I think it's going to be important that you look strategically at what can I do to get people excited about making vacation plans again. So everybody's going to kind of need to look at their marketing quiver to decide what arrows they want to pull out and use for the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, and I think we have some hope, it seems like, today, because I felt like as we watched it shut down, it was shut down when a governor would say, you have to stay at home, and people would say, oh, I have to stay at home. Okay, I'm going to stay home, so I can't go travel. But then you'd have a second wave and they would cancel. You'd have a second wave of people that would say, oh, they told me to stay home, but I'm going to stay home, in quotes, at this vacation rental in the mountains. And so they would book, and then we would book to them, and they would be scheduled to come and stay. And then the local municipality would say, we aren't really welcoming visitors right now. And so that would clear out a bunch of the reservations that had come in the last few days. And they would say, well, now we're kind of nervous and we don't think we should travel. So they would cancel. And then you'd have the third wave of visitors that said, oh, I'm really sick of being at home already. It's been a week and a half or 2 weeks, so I'm going to go on a trip. And they would come over here. And then the local authorities would say, well, we're going to start fining you if you're over here for leisure. You can only come for, something that we deem important. So then we had another wave of cancellations. And all that to say that the first step in that process was the governing board of the state or the country that would say, we really are recommending that you stay home and you not travel. So now I feel like yesterday when they're saying, the federal government saying we're going to start lifting this gently, it's going to put the choice back in the hands of the travelers. And so you're going to have the reverse option, which is now the travelers that are willing to come out with restrictions, but they're going to find a way to stay a week or a month or whatever it takes to get out of their house. I think we're going to go in reverse order of that. So I agree. I think we need to be lined up to be taking those calls and to be available for the people that want to come travel now. If they can come travel for 30 days at a time now, maybe we give them a great rate for the next 30 days until the summer travelers start coming in. So to be thinking proactively about that reverse order of what started the process and what kind of travelers are out there. I think the travelers are going to be out there soon now as we're starting to see things open up today.
Yeah, agreed. And very shortly we'll get to upcoming reservations and how we can attack that. But really quickly,
I kind of got off topic there a little bit, looking at that flat line down there. Jim getting the paddles.
Jim gets going. So you both mentioned it in passing a little bit, but wanted to dig in a little bit more on channel strategy and OTAs and your use of those. Has what you've seen over the last 30 days, has that changed your opinion of how you'll approach OTAs in different channels going forward?
Who are you asking that to? Both of us?
Whoever wants to jump on it. Yep.
The short answer is you bet.
Yeah.
I am. I think for us, we need a demonstration of partnership. The one thing I will tell you, as much as we can all carp about the dominance of particular OTAs in the market, the one thing I will say is that Verbo took the approach of saying, here's what we recommend, but you guys are the property managers at one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you had Airbnb saying, we don't care what you think. We're just going to refund everybody. And if that hurts you, well, that's just too bad. Now, I may be overstating it, but that's the way I read it. And when I start talking to a channel now, that's going to be one of my questions about that's going to be used in vetting the channel, is how are you going to handle this kind of situation? And if they don't have a good answer for me, I'm not going to use them.
Absolutely. And I think too, you have what we've found is that we have direct integrations with most of the OTAs, but we do have a channel manager for one OTA just because of the logistics of setting it up direct. We haven't gotten through the steps, which now we have time, so maybe we'll finish that up this month. But the channel managers also, what we noticed through this was that not only do you have the Airbnb response and then you have the Verbo response, but also you have your channel manager that you use. They can override all that depending on whether they have policies that vary from your policy, or if they have policies that vary from Airbnb and Verbo, which we don't use. But I talked to them through this because with the channel that we do use a channel manager for, it's a problem. And so if you put a channel manager in there, then all of a sudden you have your policy, you have the channel manager's policy, and you have the OTA's policy, and then who's going to win in that? So it becomes more and more of a negotiation as it gets more complex. So we're opting to continue in the direction of going into direct integrations, which has been how we've run the business always. So that's a logical decision for us. But also, Airbnb so far has stayed in business, and I don't see any reason particularly maybe why they wouldn't. But it's scary to me when somebody's merchant of record, and so that's always made me a little bit more nervous. And I've always appreciated that our Verbo bookings are pretty high compared to Airbnb. I'm much happier with that. And then it pushes the most important thing, which is direct bookings, that we all would rather have direct bookings if it's a less expensive option to do that. If we don't have to pay for somebody coming into our website, of course, that's the preferred. So there are a lot of reasons that we want them to book direct for our company, but it's impressed that upon us also, that we want more direct bookings. Definitely don't want somebody else to be the merchant of record, because then it does take the power away from us, and that channel managers are another layer of complexity when we're negotiating at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously OTAs and different channels have the opportunity to help you grow your business, but when things potentially go sideways, or when we have this type of disruption in the market, it obviously adds a wrinkle and changes our decision making.
Absolutely. And so it's all balanced. It's the balance between all the OTAs and the channel managers and all those things. And that's why, we've not ever been dogmatic about any of it, and have been willing to try things, because the vacation rental market is ever changing. So we're trying to be flexible within that and use the tools that are out there in a logical way and methodical way. So it is the same process, but maybe with different perspective on each of those options now than it was a month ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And excuse me. As far as the next data set, wanted to get your read on guest booking patterns since the crisis has really kicked off. And so we pulled, over the last 3 weeks, we looked at reservations that have been made and we charted them over the remainder of the year. And we did it on a percentage basis based upon dollar value. And a way to read this is pretty simply the majority of new bookings that have come in after the initial panic of coronavirus, and we saw that first, call it 10 days or so, where nobody knew really what was happening, to this almost secondary layer of this crisis of, hey, we're starting to see some booking volume. People are maybe doing the shelter in place, whatever it may be. So that's this 3-week period that we're looking at and where those reservations came in on the calendar for the remainder of the year. And from a very high level, what we're seeing at Beyond Pricing is the majority of new bookings are coming in on the very near part of the calendar, as in they aren't really coming in for peak summer months, and they certainly aren't coming in for fall as quickly as we would like. And granted, these are new bookings. These are not reschedules or moving existing reservations out. Have you seen this type of pattern? And we'll kick it to Jennifer first.
Yeah, absolutely. We were down to 0 bookings per day for several days there, and that was a little bit weird. But now we're getting somewhere between 4 and 10 bookings a day, which is significantly lower than normal. You know, I would say normally this time of year we're maybe 25 bookings a day or something like that. It's kind of slowed off by this point of the year, typically because the inventory is lower. So taking into consideration that we are getting a very small percentage of the number of bookings that we used to get, like maybe 10 to 15% of the average bookings, this is exactly what we're seeing. I would say 3 in a day might come in for check-in tomorrow or the next day, and then 1 might come in for July, and the next day we'll get maybe 3 more for check-in in the next day or 2, and then we'll get some random booking for August. And then the next day we might get 3 more bookings that are for the next day check-in, and then somebody books for May in the hopes that it'll recover. So it's very much geared towards immediate bookings, and then just some sort of random booking way out in the next, 3 to 10 months probably. There's no rhyme or reason to the ones that are coming in. People aren't saying anything about why they're coming in. They're not, not anything significant. And some of them are concerning because they're, say, in a market like Hawaii where they're booking in May. You kind of think, is Hawaii going to even be open in May? Or do these people even know? So we just kind of watch them. But in general, it's very much last minute. And then there just must be somebody hoping that they can travel at some point in the future. But there's not been nothing strong. There's not an uptick yet. I'm hopeful there will be, but there's not.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jim? How's
I'm
looking down in the Panhandle?
It's pretty much the same. We're seeing a little bit of activity, and it's generally some last minute stuff, very similar to what Jennifer said. And then, that's just a smattering of random things that carry out over the next 6 months or so. There really isn't, because of the level of activity. It's hard to say I can share a trend with you. I'm not really seeing a trend yet. This reminds me, I hate to liken it to it, but in some ways it reminds me so much of when we had the oil spill here, that there was 2 to 3 weeks, almost a month, where the booking spigot, if you will, just shut off, and then it started to get turned back on, and it feels like we're on that same front edge of that right now. But because of the government mandates, it's even slower than it was during that period of time. I think we're going to have to. I don't have enough information at the moment to be able to make a generalization. I'm hopeful that what we'll see is as the federal government and then as state governments start to talk about opening things up, that you'll start to see consumers willing to make those decisions and commitments. I just think it's a little too early to tell at the moment.
Hey, Jim, can you give a little more? The question that I get the most in talking to clients and whoever else in the industry is, what do you think it's going to look like? Let's say things open up, and frankly, we've struggled to find a parallel, and the oil spill or some of the hurricanes that you've experienced are probably a decent parallel. Can you give a little bit about what that recovery was like for you post oil spill?
Yeah, well, what we did, there were two things that we did that first of all, you've got this panic, people wanting to cancel because the news media, here's where the parallel is. The news media made it look like all the beaches were covered in oil, when in reality, you couldn't find any oil anywhere. And so we had to put a stake in the ground and say to a guest, listen, if you want to cancel, go ahead, but you're not going to get a refund. And that went over like a lead balloon. And then we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you an oil-free guarantee. And we said, well, you can't cancel, but if there's any oil on the beach when you're here, we're going to give you your money back. Well, long story short, there was no oil on the beach, and so we didn't give any money back. So, but what we did do is we also went out and we started pricing very aggressively to make sure that we got more than our competitive share. So we took some fairly aggressive steps at the time, and we actually ended up having a fairly good summer. And my feeling is here, we've got to look at all of our policies. We have to look at how we're pricing. We have to look at what our cancellation policies are. We have to look at how do we want to restore the guests' confidence in getting in their car and coming down here to give the guests all the kinds of incentive that you can give them to come on down to your vacation destination. What I, for my little part of the world, what I think is going to happen is that there is going to be less interest in people who want to vacation in getting on a plane and going somewhere, and more interest in getting in their car and going somewhere. So I have a feeling if we're smart about things, that we will capture demand that normally would go somewhere else, and they'll want to come to our part of the world. I think we have to really look at the market and look at everything. Look at how we're pricing, look at length of stays, look at cancellation policies, and decide what can I, as a vacation rental manager, relax to entice the guests to make the purchase decision to come on my way. And that's a bit of what we did during the oil spill. And I think we have to be maybe even a little more strategic or a little more tactical about it, and more aggressive about it with this circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak. Actually, you bring up a great point about pricing aggressively and trying to find that right price coming out of the crisis. And a lot of the conversations that we've been having internally, excuse me, is around the concept of discovery, price discovery, and understanding what the true price is. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you're in a specific city and every one bedroom is pricing for $100. For example, I'm painting with a very broad stroke right now. As we come out of this, we're going to need to figure out what the correct discount is given the amount of inventory currently out there and then also what feeder markets are actually coming in to visit your neck of the woods. So Jim, you're fortunate that you're a drive-to market, so there is an opportunity to capture demand from other markets and other regions. But we're going to need to be strategic about where we want to price, because if people aren't booking now and we drop price 80%, then who's to say that we couldn't have only dropped 20% or 30%?
Yeah.
I guess the point is we need to find some sort of demand pull to give us an idea of where to price as we come out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's probably starting from scratch a little bit on that, which I don't really mean from scratch, but you're kind of starting from scratch because we have so few bookings for a lot of our markets right now that when you're looking at pricing and you're starting with 0 bookings in a market where a lot of your competitors have shut their doors, for 30 or 60 or 90 days or permanently, then when the guests start coming back, are they going to be paying, all it would take would be, 30% of the bookings to be out there to price too low, and it'll take 2 extra weeks to get a decent price. So you might have to wait for those properties to fill up that are priced too low because somebody made that dramatic choice to drop the prices too low, or they thought that was the right choice, which it may be. And then you might have to roll out 2 weeks later and say, okay, we're willing to wait a couple of weeks for a little bit higher price. So it's all going to be a little bit of a gamble in each market. I think it's still do it and figure out who is coming and what our occupancy per price range is. And I think then too, you have your homes that are just exceptional and they're going to book no matter what for probably higher than they would have normally, which is a whole nother anomaly that we need to watch for and make sure that we don't lose that advantage. So,
well, yeah, that's a great point. And not, Jesse, you'll owe me a beer for this one. I am so glad we are using Beyond Pricing because
totally, me too.
Because the ability is paid for by Beyond Pricing. The ability to turn that stuff on and off is so much better for us now than I would hate to be coming out of this last year because we weren't using Beyond Pricing last year. We are now. It is a fantastic tool, and it will allow us to respond to the market on both a macro and a micro level. And I think all of us as vacation rental managers really are going to need to be in a position to respond to what we are seeing quickly. And frankly, I'm glad we have Beyond Pricing to help us do that.
Yeah, because I don't care how staffed up you are, and able to have people spend time on pricing, having the data that they're able to pull and watch, with the technology combined, takes it to a whole nother level where they're able to extract revenue where we would have never seen it. And so when you're talking about a few days or a few weeks difference in pricing with how quickly that all changed to be able to price per day based on what happened in the last 3.5 weeks, if you think about the reverse of that happening and as the bookings start coming in, it's going to be a huge, huge advantage to have the pricing there. And I think myself in particular with extra markets, I know this makes Jesse have to work really, really hard, but it's like we're saying, only then add that to 6 different markets that have different anomalies in each of them. Some are more drivable, some are not drivable, some are summer season, some are going into their slow season, so we're taking all sorts of different variables and adding it into that complex data anyway. So it's definitely important. You can do it manually, but this is my preference.
Well, I think you guys made an entire organization blush, so thank you. I appreciate it.
I swear he didn't pay us to say that.
No, definitely did not. Thank you. Okay, and so, we have another 10 minutes. I think we're going to push a little bit on Amy as far as the time that we can take up, but I think this is an important data set to point out. So we have to talk about flattening the curve. This is a different curve. This is our cancellation curve that we're seeing, and this is global. It's important to note that if you were to look at, let's say, Europe, for example, this would be a little bit more flat and a little bit more elevated. And a way to look at this, chart is these are the percentage of reservations on the calendar that were canceled. And when you look at these figures, they are taking into account that many reservations were pushed out into later in the year, so they do not count as cancellations. So you're going to follow the blue line, and you can see that it peaks out in middle of April, about 62%. And that's basically just telling you, hey, 62% of reservations that existed globally across all of the listings that we follow were canceled in late April. So just an astronomical number. Excuse me. And one thing that we've been talking to a lot of managers about is, gosh, where do you think it's going to end? When do we start getting back on our feet, and when do we start getting aggressive with pricing and marketing, whatever else it may look like? And as far as we can tell, we can talk about the conversations we've been having across all the relationships that we have, and also where folks are booking, so where guests are beginning to make reservations. We see early May as the next beachhead. So a lot of people are really expecting that to be, it might be overly optimistic, but a lot of folks are seeing that as where it could potentially be kind of the linchpin or a turning point in the market and reservation pace, and ideally a slowdown in cancellations. We'll kick it to you, Jim, first. How are you looking at summer and rolling out through this kind of, I guess, rollout with some of the restrictions coming up?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we've tried to do is where we have guests, where we have guests who are looking beyond the governmental shutdown periods and saying, gee, I think I want to cancel. Our approach has been, and it took a little bit to sort of zero in on it. Our approach has been, listen, we've got to be the ones who are driving the cancellation. In other words, there's a reason why the beaches are closed. There's a reason why the government is shut down, has shut down short-term rentals for a specified period of time. And so while we are hearing from people in the June-July period going, gee, we're just not sure, our approach has been, listen, guys, you really need, if you want to make sure that you are able to get a refund, you really need to hang in there, because we believe things are going to be open. So we've taken the governmental restrictions as to be our guiding light. And so our summer business is in place. It's not going away. And when we've told the guests that, they've said, okay, we get it. We're hanging in. So it's really whatever the federal government and state governments do, it's what's going to drive cancellations for us.
Mm-hmm. And so it sounds as though you are, I mean, a lot of the policies that you're enacting are in place to minimize cancellations.
You bet.
Have you started to look at generating any demand for summer, or is it more so let's defend, and then when we get more information, we'll start being more offensive?
Well, that's a great question. Our focus has been really on let's defend, number one. But number two, yeah, we've started to look at the summer and trying to make decisions, and we've already made some about what do we need to do to make sure that we are positioned correctly to maximize whatever business there in the summer. So there are obviously a number of levers you can pull. We started to pull some of those levers, and we will continue looking at them and deciding what's next for us. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do after that? Because I believe that there's going to be demand for the summer, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting as much of it as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to stay close to the vest on what those levers are. I can already
You
tell.
bet. Yeah, I want to be helpful for everybody, but not that helpful.
All right, fair enough.
That's
fair.
fair.
Enough.
I
Yeah.
like that. We have been. I think that the best way to drive demand right now is to keep people from canceling, because those are essentially the only bookings we have coming in are the ones that are already sitting on the books, and keeping them from canceling is basically the demand that we do have, which has led us to modify our cancellation policies significantly. And whether or not I do that long term is to be determined. But I've been sitting on that and swirling it around for the last few days. What's it going to look like in 2021 when somebody wants to book? But for right now, going into that summer on that curve and how to flatten that curve, if somebody's saying, hey, I want to book for July, but what if COVID is still around? We're giving them our very modified cancellation policy, which is, you know what, check with us. Our normal cancellation policy is 30 days. So that's what you have right now. But if you get to July 1st and you're supposed to be coming in August 1st, check with us, because it might be modified again by that point. And, and at this point, we're telling people they can cancel up to the last minute. So we're being proactive in that. The cancellation policy is how we're attracting new guests for the future and avoiding cancellations for the future. We'll see, that's also to be determined how it's working.
Well, that's right. And by the way, here's something that nobody's talked about, or we haven't talked about as part of this is that people who are canceling, and they're canceling outside the terms of your rental agreement, are disputing their credit cards. How are you defending them? Everybody needs to look at their rental agreements and really start to be very clear about the customer's obligation and the property manager's obligation. Our agreements are pretty good, but even that said, I'm losing a dispute here and there that I shouldn't be losing. So, so I think we all really need to, coming out of this, you need to look at your agreements with your guests and your agreements with your owners. And because I had, crazy as it may seem, I had an owner call me saying, well, why are you giving them their, the governor shuts down the state and the owner says, well, gee, why are you giving them their money back? And I said, are you kidding me? So this is unforeseen. And I don't know that any one of us in their right mind could have prepared for it, but boy, we better take all the lessons out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's be better because we went through all this, and let's learn from it so that next time it happens, we're better prepared.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a great wrap up. Let's be better from it. Well, Jim and Jennifer, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure. I know on behalf of everybody at Beyond Pricing, thank you so much for joining. We were so happy to have two great managers kind of help out in this discussion, and I hope that this was helpful for anybody who was listening.
Thank you, and thank you, Amy, for having us.
Thanks, Jesse. I know I appreciate it, and the chance to have a chat with Jennifer, whom I've never met in my whole life. It's great.
I know. We're going to meet one day, Jim.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Take care, everybody. Best of luck to all of you.